The morning began like every other in Livingston, Texas. Gray light spilling through pine trees, the quiet sound of tires over damp gravel. It was February 15th, 2024, an ordinary day, the kind of day that passes without notice until something stops it forever. 11-year-old Audrii Cunningham left home for the bus stop, her small backpack resting against her shoulder. She never made it there. By afternoon, her absence had already settled into the air, a silence too heavy for the hour. Neighbors said the road was empty that morning. A few remembered seeing a familiar truck idling near the edge of the property. Others weren't sure. The search began before sunset, flashlights moving through thin fog, voices calling her name as if she could still answer. Her backpack was found first, lying close to the waterline of Lake Livingston. Nothing else was out of place. For 5 days, the town lived in suspended time. Posters curled against poles, the air turned colder. And then the Trinity River gave something back, a small body tied to a rock. When they pulled her from the current, it wasn't just a crime that surfaced. It was a betrayal shaped by familiarity. A man who had once driven her to school. A man her family had trusted. The stillness of that morning has never left Livingston. It lingers, even now, in the place where she was supposed to wait for the bus. The road to the bus stop is short and quiet, lined with pine needles and patches of wet gravel that still glisten from the early morning mist. It is February 15th, 2024, in Livingston, Texas. The air is pale and still, holding the kind of silence that exists before the sound of tires or footsteps. 11-year-old Audrii Cunningham should have been there, waiting. She wasn't. Her absence begins quietly. A bus moves along its route. The driver looks toward the stop, then keeps driving. Time passes in small intervals, one call, then another. A parent's voice carries through a phone line, growing tighter with every unanswered question. By noon, the day has changed shape. Familiar streets now belong to search teams and police cruisers. As evening comes, flashlights move through the trees, their narrow beams trembling against the branches. They search the edges of Lake Livingston, tracing the waterline inch by inch. In the fading light, something bright appears between the weeds, a backpack. Small, ordinary, and wrong in its placement. It becomes the first fixed point in a story that no one wants to believe is real. An Amber Alert flashes across phones and highway boards. Her photo appears beside the words "missing child." The town begins to shrink around the image. Every corner store and gas station carries her name. Neighbors search along the lake. Strangers volunteer to walk the woods. The hours stretch into a pattern of movement and waiting. 5 days later, the search reaches the Trinity River. The water is dark, swollen from winter rain, its surface slow and deceptive. When searchers wade in, they find something caught beneath the current, a small body, bound and anchored by a rock. No one speaks for several moments. The air itself feels suspended. The quiet, already heavy, becomes unbearable. What follows is the confirmation of what the town already knows. It is her. The child who left for school and never arrived, the one whose backpack lay by the lake, the one they had all been calling for. The man accused of killing her lived nearby. He had been a friend of her father, someone trusted enough to give rides to the bus stop. He had smiled in family photographs. Now his name was listed as the suspect, a man with a long history of violence, drugs, and crimes that had once placed him behind bars. Trust, in this case, had not been broken suddenly. It had been eroding quietly over years, unseen by those who believed they were safe. The autopsy would later speak in precise language: blunt head trauma, homicidal violence. But those words would come much later. For now, all that remained was a small house with a porch light still burning, a town learning how to live inside the space left behind, and a stretch of gravel road that will always feel incomplete. The morning has never fully ended in Livingston. It loops endlessly in memory, the place where she should have stood, the echo of a name called into the trees, and the stillness of the river that carried her home. The next morning began with the same sound that had filled the night, the low hum of generators and radios. Search teams were still scattered along the banks of the river, their boots sinking into wet ground. The air was cold, clean, and thin, carrying voices across long distances. The investigation had already begun, though no one had said the word aloud. In small towns, investigations move differently. They begin not in offices, but on porches, in kitchens, at familiar tables where names are shared quietly. Detectives from Polk County arrived early. They did not rush. They observed. Every motion, from a glance to a footprint, was recorded. A timeline was forming, a careful reconstruction of ordinary moments before they became evidence. The first question was always the same: who last saw her? Neighbors mentioned a man who lived in a trailer near the Cunningham home, someone close enough to be trusted, someone who had often taken her to her bus stop. His name appeared early in the notes. He had a past, but in small communities, pasts are tolerated when they stay quiet. He had helped with small chores, borrowed tools, waved at passing cars. Nothing about him suggested danger until absence drew his outline sharply. On February 16th, a day after she vanished, officers brought him in for questioning. His story bent at small angles. He claimed to have seen her that morning. He said he went about his usual day. The words fit together, but not perfectly. Surveillance checks, digital pings, and witness cross-references began to pull threads through the story. The shape of his routine changed under scrutiny. Officers searched his trailer, a small, cluttered space at the edge of the property. Inside, nothing obvious at first. The ordinary disorder of a solitary life: clothes in corners, tools on tables, a half-drunk bottle on the counter. But ordinary is not the same as innocent. Near the doorway, they found items out of place, faint traces that would later matter. A length of cord, a stain too small to dismiss, and a vehicle key tied to a previous record. The evidence would need confirmation, but the direction was clear. The suspect's truck became the next focus. Mud clung to the tires in irregular patterns. Forensics would later compare the soil to sediment taken from the riverbank. The alignment matched. Inside the cab, fibers consistent with fabric from a child's clothing. Each detail small, each one sharpening the outline of what happened after the morning bus stop. The search widened. Dogs traced scent from the property toward the lake, then lost it at water's edge. Boats combed the current again, retracing what had already been scanned. Drones followed coordinates from cell tower data. Technology and instinct moved together in slow rhythm. What was once hope had turned into precision, the work of proving what had already become probable. The man's record filled in background the town had forgotten or chosen to overlook. Prior offenses: assault, possession, indecency with a child. Short sentences, early releases, quiet relocations. Each line a warning that had faded over time. The investigation assembled these fragments, not for outrage, but for understanding the pattern that had preceded the day she disappeared. When the results from the lab arrived, they were factual, unembellished. The same soil composition as the Trinity River. Trace DNA that confirmed proximity. Enough to close the circle between the lake, the truck, and the river's edge. The evidence told a story without voice or motive, a story written in fragments of material left behind. On February 20th, search teams recovered the body. By February 21st, charges had been upgraded to capital murder. The timeline that had begun with a missed bus ended in a courtroom filing. Outside, the town remained still. Inside, the case file thickened with statements, signatures, timestamps. Investigators spoke rarely to the press. Their tone remained level, factual, without narrative. They understood what could not be said, that beyond the legal framework was something quieter and heavier, something that could not fit into forms or reports. The small town that had once spoken freely now whispered. Parents walked their children to the bus stop again, standing longer than before. Neighbors watched each other differently. Trust, once assumed, had become an act of calculation. In the official record, the investigation was successful. Evidence gathered, charges filed, case secured. But in the quiet logic of the town, success felt like failure delayed. Every fact confirmed the same truth: she should have been safe. When the investigators finally left Livingston, the marks of their presence remained. Tire tracks in soft earth, the faint smell of river water on their boots, notes pressed into folders that would travel to courtrooms far away. The case was now evidence, not life. The river returned to stillness, and the sound of machinery faded. What stayed behind was silence, the kind that comes not from mystery, but from knowing too much. The investigation had drawn its map. The coordinates were set. The evidence connected one man to one child. But the deeper question, why, existed somewhere beyond the limits of paper and proof. In every quiet crime, there is a progression before the act. Small permissions, small failures. They unfold in silence long before the moment becomes irreversible. The man at the center of this case was not a stranger to punishment. He had drifted through years of instability, minor jobs, short stays, scattered arrests. He lived close enough to the family to blur the line between familiarity and intrusion. His presence had become part of the background, the neighbor who fixed small things, who borrowed gasoline, who waved from the porch. The kind of closeness that builds invisibly, without attention, until it feels natural. In the months before February, his life was unremarkable. He had finished a short sentence the year before and returned to the same property. There were no major incidents, no confrontations, only the slow erosion of structure. Days without work, nights without purpose. People like him survive on repetition. When the pattern breaks, control slips in the same way. The morning she disappeared was likely planned, but not in the way one plans an event. It was opportunity mistaken for control. A sudden act growing from a long history of unresolved impulses. He had transported her before. The route was familiar, the trust already granted. The familiarity itself became a weapon. Forensic psychology often describes this kind of violence as proximity abuse, the convergence of access, secrecy, and perceived power. He lived within their trust, which made the act not spontaneous but inevitable in the absence of restraint. Each decision after the first became an attempt to contain it. Concealment, disposal, silence. The logic of panic disguised as order. When he bound the small body to a rock and lowered it into the current, It was not a calculated move to escape guilt. It was an effort to erase presence. But water is a poor accomplice. It reveals through movement what it tries to hide. The rope, the knot, the location, each one traced back to his reach. In interviews, he showed fragments of denial, repeating statements that sounded memorized rather than believed. His expression stayed flat, but his words contradicted themselves. He insisted on coincidence, on timing, on chance. But guilt in cases like this is rarely loud. It hides in the gaps, the phrases that end too quickly, the moments when silence lasts too long. What investigators found most striking was not his anger or fear, but his calm. It was the kind that comes from long practice, the posture of someone who has lied before and survived it. He spoke as though the outcome was negotiable, as though the narrative could still bend toward innocence if he held the right tone. But calmness can also be decay. It is the stillness of someone whose inner order has already collapsed, who no longer feels the moral weight of what has happened. There was no remorse in his language, only discomfort at exposure. The act was not born from hatred, but from emptiness. The absence of empathy that allows another life to be reduced to an impulse. When psychologists later examined his record, they saw a consistent thread: escalation without reflection. Each prior offense had been smaller, but each carried the same absence of awareness. For men like this, punishment does not reform. It only pauses behavior until opportunity returns. The town began to study his past through media reports. Old mugshots, charges, brief sentencing notes. The pattern became public, but patterns do not explain. They only confirm what already happened, too late to prevent it. In court filings, the term capital murder was used. The phrase is absolute. It leaves no room for speculation about motive or circumstance. Yet behind those two words lies a slow descent, from neighbor to suspect, from human to predator, from a name spoken in passing to one whispered in disgust. For those who knew him, the transformation felt unreal. They remembered his casual tone, the way he joked, the harmless familiarity. The idea that such evil could hide behind ordinariness unsettled everyone. It wasn't rage that killed her, it was routine. A morning like any other, a trusted face, a brief silence, and then nothing. This is the psychology of proximity. How normality masks danger so effectively that it becomes invisible. It isn't a monster lurking in darkness. It's a person who blends into the background, whose cruelty hides inside normal gestures. By the time the truth surfaced, the question wasn't how could he do it, it was how did no one see it sooner. Cold calm crime narration, active calm flow. But hindsight doesn't offer protection, it only deepens the unease. The man remained silent through most of the proceedings. When asked direct questions, he answered with slight nods or monosyllables. His face betrayed nothing. To the observers, it seemed less like defiance and more like detachment, as though the world around him had already receded and he was standing in a private void of his own making. Psychologists call it flattening, the reduction of emotional expression following sustained moral disconnection. To him, the act was already over, irrelevant to the present. Only the system still cared about meaning. In that courtroom quiet, his composure was more disturbing than confession would have been. Evil, when it appears without expression, feels colder, more enduring. It does not shout, it waits. By the end of the psychological assessment, no new revelation emerged. There was no trauma to justify, no motive to soften. The cause remained internal, a vacancy where empathy should have lived. And so, the investigation's focus shifted from his mind back to its aftermath, to the spaces and people left behind, to the air that still carried her name, to the silence that began the moment she stepped toward the bus stop and never returned. The descent had ended where it began, in stillness. The courtroom in Polk County was built for routine hearings, not for grief. The benches were narrow, the walls pale, the lighting neutral. Yet every sound inside that room carried more weight than it should. February had already turned to spring when the first hearing began. Outside, the air smelled faintly of pine again. Inside, time felt suspended. He was led in quietly, wrists bound, eyes lowered. There was no spectacle. The chains only clicked once before the guard stopped walking. Across the room sat her family, still and deliberate. They did not look at him often. When they did, it was to confirm that he was real. Every proceeding after that was slow and procedural. Charge readings, evidence submission, witness scheduling, each step wrapped in silence. The prosecution spoke without flourish. They described a sequence already proven. The child who left home, the trail to the lake, the recovery from the river, the match of soil, the confirmation of cause. Their tone remained level because the facts were enough. The defense said little. There was nothing to soften. Outside the courthouse, the town had changed its rhythm. School mornings were louder now, parents walking their children to the curb, neighbors watching from windows. A routine act had become a ritual of caution. At the bus stop, a new sign had been placed, bright and freshly painted. People passed it without speaking. News cameras came briefly, then left when the headlines cooled. But for Livingston, the story never cooled. It lived inside conversations cut short, inside the empty chair at the memorial service, inside the locked trailer still sitting on the family's property. On March 2, a memorial was held. The church overflowed. The pastor spoke gently, his voice steady but strained. He talked about light, about innocence, about how one small life could make an entire community reconsider what it means to look after its own. When the service ended, the crowd lingered outside, unwilling to step back into ordinary daylight. Weeks later came the indictment, 2 counts of capital murder. The legal language was clinical, but the words struck with finality. They confirmed what the river and the evidence had already said. This was deliberate, irreversible, and bound by law to consequence. After the hearings, the courthouse emptied. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hall, then faded. In small towns, trials are not spectacles. They are scars that stay visible long after reporters move on. For the family, aftermath meant learning the mechanics of survival, how to answer questions kindly when strangers ask, how to walk past the bus stop without stopping, how to keep a light on in a room that no longer needs it. Grief became routine, appearing in the small hours, in the pauses between daily chores. For investigators, the case closed on paper, but stayed open in thought. They returned to their offices, sorted files, and prepared for the next call. But this one followed them. Some kept photos folded into their notebooks. Others avoided talking about it altogether. At night, the river sounded the same as before. Water moved over stone, indifferent to what had been placed within it. The current erased traces of human activity, but not memory. Fishermen still cast lines there, though more quietly now. They said the water felt heavier. Months later, as the legal process slowed into appeals and filings, the town began to recover its surface calm. Yet settled changes remained. Doors locked earlier, conversations shortened, trust rationed carefully. The story of a single morning had reshaped how people measured safety. It was no longer about distance or daylight. It was about the proximity of harm, how close it could live, how familiar it could look. In the quiet arithmetic of justice, sentences and verdicts cannot balance loss. The court could assign years, even life, but the scale never leveled. For those who remained, closure was a phrase used in paperwork, not in life. The house where she lived still stands. The path to the bus stop still exists. The gravel is the same, though the sound of footsteps has changed. When wind moves through the trees, it carries the same rhythm that began everything: a stillness before motion, a space before loss. The aftermath of this crime is not measured in punishment or time served. It exists in the altered silence of a place that once felt safe and now does not. And in that silence, the memory of one morning continues to hum beneath every ordinary sound. Months passed, yet the town remained caught between motion and memory. The news cycle had shifted elsewhere, but here, in Livingston, time moved differently. The streets carried the same names, the same familiar turns, but everything now existed under a subtle shadow, one that people didn't acknowledge, only adjusted to. At dusk, the air around the river cooled quickly. The surface mirrored the trees and the dim orange of nearby streetlights. Sometimes, fishermen still came to the bank. They stood where searchers once stood, avoiding conversation, their lines cutting the water in quiet arcs. No one spoke about what the river gave back. They didn't need to. It was already part of the place, like a buried current beneath every sound. In the weeks after the indictment, a quiet kind of grief settled over the town. Not dramatic, not loud, but heavy in its persistence. At the school, teachers left her desk untouched for a time. A drawing remained pinned on the wall. The sound of the morning bell felt different, as if its echo carried an absence it couldn't name. The family kept the porch light on for months. It wasn't symbolic at first, just habit, but over time it became something else, a small defiance against darkness, a way to remember what routine once meant before it was broken. When people spoke about what happened, they used careful language. The case, the tragedy, that morning. Rarely her name, not out of avoidance, but because saying it reopened something still raw. Names, when spoken, make the abstract too real again. What lingered most was the ordinariness of it all. The road, the weather, the hour, nothing unusual. The kind of morning that could have belonged to anyone. And that is what unsettled people most, that safety had looked so normal until it wasn't. Trust, once a quiet foundation, had become fragile. Parents watched over children longer. Strangers looked both ways before speaking. Every act of kindness now required a small leap of faith. The illusion of certainty, that harm announces itself, that danger wears a face, had dissolved. What replaced it was vigilance, calm on the surface, restless underneath. The man accused remains behind walls now, held without bail. Time continues for him in fluorescent light, divided into routines designed to remove meaning. For the town, his name is no longer spoken. Silence has done what justice could not. It erased him. But silence does not always heal. It preserves. In Livingston, the memory of that February morning lives in small details. The flicker of a porch bulb, the way gravel shifts underfoot, the faint echo of a school bus braking on a quiet road. Each sound holds a residue of that day. Years from now, newcomers will drive past the river without knowing. They'll see calm water, a reflection of trees, and think it peaceful. But for those who remember, peace will always feel like a disguise. The landscape remains unchanged, but meaning has altered permanently. True evil, they've come to understand, rarely announces itself. It arrives in routine, in gestures of trust, in familiar faces, in the small windows where the world believes it's safe. That is what this case left behind, not only loss, but awareness. There is no resolution, no closing statement that restores balance. Only the continuation of ordinary life, carrying the quiet weight of what was learned too late. In the stillness of night, when the wind moves through the trees near the bus stop, it sounds almost like breathing, slow, steady, alive. The world keeps turning, as it must. But for those who listen closely, the air around Livingston still holds that one unfinished moment, the space between innocence and its absence, between trust and its undoing. And so the story ends not with an answer, but with a silence that continues, calm, unbroken, and complete.